Greetings, Saints fans. Steve Geller here along with Jeff Nowak for another edition of Inside Black and Gold, a pre-mini rookie camp edition. Can't wait for that over the weekend coming up. We got some news about a Saints great getting his own day that we'll be celebrating. The legend at quarterback, Drew Brees, joining Sports Talk. And a little tiny bit of some Derek Carr news. What is going on with you, Jeff? Did you get to partake in Jazz Fest at all?
Mini rookie camp. I like that. That's what you should call it now, on mini rookie camp. No, I did not. I didn't go to Jazz Fest.
I didn't make it this year either, sadly.
Yeah, I've gotten to the point where it's like, if I don't get a free ticket, I'm just like, pay money to go stand in the sun for 5 hours. And like, there better be someone there I actually want to see. You know, as much as I like Lenny Kravitz, wouldn't say it's my gotta go see it.
Plus on a Sunday, that's tough for me. I'm sorry. I'm definitely an old man like that. I need a recoup day here.
My wife did drag me to a concert I had no interest in seeing on that Thursday. So maybe that, you know, it kind of hurt my concert going vibes. Yeah. I don't know if there's any LCD sound system fans out there. I'm not that, but we got dragged to the Sanger. We sat through a majority of that show. Didn't care for it. And so I decided to hang out on Sunday and not go to Jazz Fest.
That's tough, especially, I mean, usually there's a good handful of acts I'm dying to see. This year, it's either I had seen a band like Pearl Jam already, or it was just nobody was drawing me out there. So I missed the fest this year.
Yeah, and I mean, the first week is the draft, you know, and I'm usually so exhausted.
Always, right.
I want a day off. Standing out in the sun is not a day off to me. Day off to me is laying on my couch doing nothing. And so that's what I did. But yeah, that was my weekend. But, you know, one day I am going to celebrate is, happy, we should have said this coming in, happy Cam Jordan Day Eve, Steve.
Yes.
It's time. It is Cam Jordan Day on May 8th in the city of New Orleans, apparently. The New Orleans City Council has declared that May 8th is Cam Jordan Day. So I'll be out there tomorrow morning. I guess if you're listening to this today morning on May 8th, I think there's going to be a band. I think Edna Carr maybe is going to be out there. I think that was what I read. So that'll be fun. Cam Jordan Day. And, that's the thing about Cam that's interesting. Is like, I think there's a little bit of like a split market on Cam at this point of like, kind of just want him to go away, but also don't want him to play anywhere else, right? Like when he retires, he will be in the Ring of Honor. He will be a Saints Hall of Famer. He should be an NFL Hall of Famer. Right now, he's not producing at that level. So I think there's some maybe resentment toward that idea of like the Cam we remember versus the Cam we have now. But like, there's no question of like the impact he's had. And, I think that's a big part of the reason why he doesn't want to go anywhere else. Like, he wants to finish his career here, but in order for that to happen, you have to play it.
Yeah. The biggest, I think, complaint from most Whodats is not that he's still around. I guess it's his paycheck that he's still making and not really producing those elite numbers anymore.
He did take a pay cut though. So, that probably should help grease the skids a little on how people feel about that contract.
Saints fans are very rational.
He did take less money, so we should give him credit for that. But yeah, I don't have anything else to say about that other than tomorrow's Cam Jordan Day as we record this. We will have some other basic. There's not a ton of news. Like, this is kind of our rundown segment that we do. There's not a ton of news. We will hear from Drew Brees in the next segment. He did come on Sports Talk this week, so we'll hear from him on the quarterback situation. We'll talk a little more about Tyler Shough as we go here. Final segment, we're going to have more of a preview of rookie minicamp. Couple UDFAs we think have a good chance to make the roster, and why. What are we looking forward to seeing? All that stuff. But first, I want to get into the quarterback situation. A quarterback who will not be at rookie minicamp, but will he be at the actual training camp? That's what we're going to have to find out. Jane Slater of the NFL Network gave some updates. I would say that it's a lot of stuff that we kind of knew already, but had not confirmed. This is what she had to say on NFL Network yesterday regarding the Derek Carr of it all.
When I was in New Orleans, it came out ahead of the draft that Derek Carr had this shoulder injury. And I think it shocked actually a lot of people even that are familiar with the team and work around the facility. And Mickey Loomis wasn't elaborating on it despite getting pressed by reporters. I've asked a lot of questions, and I'm sure they're very similar to the fans. Well, when did this shoulder injury take place? Well, I've gotten just a little bit more information today. It's my understanding that Derek Carr absolutely believes that this shoulder injury took place during the same game that he injured the wrist. Now, why are we just hearing about it now? Well, it's my understanding that he wasn't really throwing, obviously, after he injured the wrist. And, afterwards, they were essentially eliminated from contention. And he really didn't start throwing a bunch until about here lately, as he was getting ready to start ramping up for the spring. And that's when he noticed that he had this issue in his shoulder. So it's my understanding that he has had surgery to that shoulder before, because there are plenty of fans out there, and I've seen people, on the airways. Well, why doesn't he just go get shoulder surgery? Let's knock this thing out. Let's get a resolution. Sounds like he's trying to avoid that, but he wants to see if he can actually play through with this shoulder injury. The other thing that's come up, Tom, is I've heard people down in New Orleans say, well, where is Carr? Why isn't he around the building? It's a new coaching staff. Why isn't he contributing more? He is the face of the franchise. Well, it's my understanding that he has been down to New Orleans twice in the last few weeks. He's met with the team doctor at the facility. Now, it's unclear if he's met with Kellen Moore in person. I know that he and Kellen Moore have at least talked, but it doesn't sound like, and I've heard this because, living here in Dallas, I've got a lot of friends that are Saints fans. I know a lot of people in New Orleans. It was beginning to feel like maybe Carr was giving them the middle finger down there. It is my understanding, according to someone close to him, that that is not the case here. He is trying to figure out what makes the most sense for his shoulder, and he is in constant communication with Mickey Loomis, but that sounds like there's going to be a decision sooner rather than later. So that's all the update that I can give you. I wish that I had more, but that's more than we've had in the last couple of weeks, Tom.
Jeff, when she says sooner rather than later, that's like a little dagger in my heart, because that's all I remember Sean Payton saying back in the days with the Jarvis Bird experience.
Yeah, I hate that because it means nothing.
Nothing.
In this case, I do think you're at kind of an interesting time, because why didn't this surgery occur immediately after the season? Well, like she mentioned, and she did explain a little bit more on social media of the ramp up process back at the end of the regular season, like we all knew he was trying to come back. There was not any actual throwing. It was off to the side with some players, like some injured players like Alvin Kamara, with kind of a simulated, not an actual football, so it wasn't full throwing like you would need to ramp up into a season. So that's how he would say, hey, I didn't notice it then, but I did notice it now. I don't know. The timeline is weird, but that is what David Carr said on NFL Network a few weeks ago. So it is at least consistent to what they've been saying. So if that's the story, that's the story. As far as the surgery, I kind of am of the understanding that, okay, if you're a quarterback that has surgery in the offseason on your shoulder, you're probably done for that year. That's not a position that you can just say we're going to get a surgery done, and then midway through the season, we're going to jump in and just go full. You kind of need a full offseason probably to rehab and get ready for the next season. We're at a point now where I don't think it's something you want to drag out to the end of camp, see how it goes, and then have surgery then. Because if you're Derek Carr in this scenario, you're probably if you're having a surgery, you're probably erasing 2025 from your NFL career. But you want it to only erase 2025. You don't want to erase 2025 and then a good chunk of the 2026 offseason when you would want to be kind of getting back into game shape. You definitely don't want to erase 2025 and then 6 weeks of 2026, at which point a team won't even want to take a chance on you. So I think that's when you say sooner rather than later, I believe that, because if you're going to have that surgery, you're probably going to want to have it in, say, June prior to camp, rather than dragging it out to the end of the offseason and then making a decision based on how camp goes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I hear you. Something I'm not clear on, though, still either is, okay, if the shoulder issue occurred when Derek fractured his hand against the New York Giants in week 14, is it the left shoulder because it was the left wrist, or is it his right shoulder?
It's got to be the right shoulder.
I don't know.
It's got to be the right shoulder.
I would think it's the right shoulder.
Huh?
I would think it's the right shoulder.
Yeah, I can't imagine. If it's a throwing issue, which is what is stated to be,
right,
then it has to be the right shoulder, because I don't think there's anything I don't think throwing a ball, it's oh no, my shoulder, right? If it was a significant enough injury that you would have to have surgery, you would probably have known about it. This is a throwing issue, right? And the torque that you put on your arm throwing a football at a professional level is significant, right? Unless you are doing that, you probably don't know if there's anything going on in there. So I kind of buy that. I don't think the communication was as good as it needed to be, and that's where we are at right now, as everyone's trying to massage that situation. All that said, like, if that's the case, fine. Like, it's just weird that it's taken until now for that information to get out, and we'll see. You know, the other thing, obviously, as she mentioned, he's been in New Orleans, he's been talking to doctors, whatever. So we'll see how that goes, but I don't think this is going to drag out much longer. I think you're going to have a decision one way or the other over the next several weeks. I would imagine prior to OTAs. Like, I don't think if you're going to have surgery, if you're going to make a decision on surgery, you're going to want to do it quickly, and it's going to be something that the team figures out quickly. Now, the question becomes, do you cut Derek Carr? Do you hold on to him for the offseason and maintain some flexibility of, hey, maybe we can swing a trade? Maybe you can say, hey, instead of taking that full cap hit next year, you hold on to him and make him a post Q1 cut next year to ease that burden. Because if not, then you're talking about, you know, 20 million this year, 40 million next year. 60 million next year. And then that becomes a really difficult scenario to navigate next year. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. But until we see him out on the field, I'm going to go under the assumption that the scenario for the Saints is Tyler Shough or Spencer Rattler.
I'm right with you there. I'm all aboard the Spencer Shough train right now, just because of the too many unknowns with Derek Carr, and I'm basing this solely from what we've been getting from the fans' reaction and input. It's really hard for me to imagine Derek Carr stepping on that field week one, if it's, or whatever week it is, the home opener in the Superdome, to, I would imagine, a rain of boos coming down in the season opener.
Yeah, it just wouldn't go well.
It's a bad situation, man.
The level he would need to play at to even be passively accepted as like, oh, we'll see what happens, is impossible. Like, it's the scenario that it just will not end the way that anyone. I mean, if the Saints want it to end in the way that they switch to Tyler Shough midseason, then maybe it ends that way. But in the sense of like people going to that building and being excited and spending money and rooting for the team in the way that you hope they would, just don't see it. I think the relationship is torn beyond repair. And the only question is whether Derek Carr's shoulder is also torn beyond repair. But like, I believe that the relationship is frayed to the point of no return. So throwing him out there would be a disservice to him. You talking about a guy who's like, I don't want to be a bridge. Well, even under those circumstances, this is an ugly version of what a bridge quarterback is, right? You know, like you draft Justin Fields and you bring in Andy Dalton, and you're like, okay, the fans can like accept like this is a means to an end, but like no one's out there aggressively booing Andy Dalton. You know, they're just like, oh, this is the scenario until it's done. In this case, like I just think people would not accept it. So I think it would be in their best interest to move on. It would probably be in Derek Carr's best interest to have surgery, clean up his shoulder as best as possible, so that when he does move on to another team, he is as healthy and ready to go as possible. And however long his career lasts beyond that, he'll be 35 years old. He'll at least have a clean bill of health on that throwing shoulder, which that's your stock and trade. That is your lifeblood as a quarterback, is the ability to throw football. If you can't, Derek Carr isn't a top 5 quarterback, but he does have top 10 probably throwing talent in terms of his, like, you see him out there and he's able to just flick his wrist and get the ball 60 yards downfield. Like, he needs to be able to do that for any team to feel like he's their starting quarterback. So that's kind of where I am on it. And we'll see how it goes. Like, I think it's easy for me to sit here and say, just have surgery. You know, I'm not the one getting my shoulder cut open. Surgeries are not 100%. There are mistakes. Some things don't go as planned. Remember, Michael Thomas had the ankle surgery. His foot or his ankle rejected the equipment they put in there, and that extended his recovery, and then it became this whole thing. I don't think he was ever the same player again. So, you're talking about your shoulder, like, again, your throwing shoulder, your lifeblood as a football player. So, we'll see how that goes. But that's really all I have on it right now. And, we're going to see Tyler Shough out at rookie minicamp we'll see him on Saturday. They report tomorrow, May 8th, on Cam Jordan Day. Practices start Friday. They go Saturday and Sunday. We'll see him. We'll talk to them on Saturday. The media will be out there on Saturday. So that's kind of where we'll go from there.
I appreciate too, Jeff. We've seen Tyler Shough around the city already, getting ingratiated into the New Orleans, the Who Dat Nation. Love the fact he's out at Tulane practicing with some guys in that group. Spencer Rattler's not throwing any hissy fits. He's out there too, which is pretty impressive. I love seeing that, embracing the competition.
Yeah, no, I mean, whoever's giving Tyler advice on how he should handle this process is giving him the right advice, and it's a lot easier. I think it'd be easy to sit there and be like, well, Tyler's doing all these things that Derek wasn't doing. And I don't know, I think it's a lot easier to join a team as a rookie and kind of start from the ground up rather than parachuting in as a 32-year-old starting quarterback who is expected to take the reins immediately and win games. It's gonna look different. All that said, he's handling it well, right? And that's all you could ask. I think he's got the personality that's going to win people over time as they get to know him. Like going to Drago's for your first meal in the city is a good idea. It's what you should do. Like, food is important to people here. Like, don't scoff at it and go to Chipotle. Like, embrace it, right? Come in humble, which again, like, it's really easy to come in humble as a rookie and not a 32-year-old quarterback who you expect to come in day one, lead that room and win games. So yeah, that said, like, I'm excited. I think it's going to be interesting. He has a jersey number according to the Saints roster.
Yeah,
we'll see if that sticks. I think it would be smart for it to stick because you got to sell jerseys, and I don't think people appreciate when you buy a number 6 Tyler Shough jersey and then in 3 months it's number 12 or whatever. I don't know. It can't be 12, but you get the idea. Like, I think when they put that number up there, that's going to stay. And Thomas Morstead encouraged him to take number 6. I saw someone say like Thomas Morstead gave him permission to wear number 6. And I was like, I don't think that's how we need to phrase that. Thomas Morstead has no control over who. Did he give Marcus May permission to wear number 6? Like, no, he's saying, please wear number 6. It's a great number.
Right. It treated me well. Hope it does the same for you kind of thing. Relax.
Yeah. Like, former players don't, if their number is retired, like what happened with Warren Moon and the Titans, which I think is stupid. Like, don't put players in position to have to give permission to wear their retired number. If the number is retired, don't let people wear it, or don't retire the number in the first place. Like, don't put Warren Moon in a position where he has to be the bad guy. Anyway, like number 8 and number 9 with the Saints are not officially retired, but no one's going to wear them, and everyone understands that. So no one even asks, except for Devontae Freeman, when he came that one time as a free agent and was like, how about can I get number 8? Like, no, you can't. Sorry, Devontae. Anyway, but yeah, so a few other numbers that have been issued unofficially as per the Saints website, which can change. Like, we've seen these change in the past. Right. But the rookie class, Kelvin Banks, number 71. He's taking Ryan Ramczyk's old number. Vernon Broughton, number 91. Which is a good defensive tackle number. I think defensive tackle should be in the 90s, personally. Fadil Diggs, edge rusher, number 40, which is not a good defensive end number. I hate that, but whatever. We'll see how it goes for him. Maliki Madaval, the tight end, we're number 80. Devin Neal, the running back, in number 30. Quincy Riley, the cornerback, at Louisville, number 29. Jonas Sanker, safety out of Virginia, number 33. As we mentioned, Tyler Shough is in number 6. Danny Stutzman is in number 47. So those are the draft picks.
Looking good. I mean, we'll see what these guys can do a little bit on the open minicamp practice. But as we all know, there's not too much going on in this. There's a lot of kind of getting acquainted with the facility, their surroundings, and, not so much on the field work, I feel, yet.
Yeah, and you're getting just like few pages of the playbook. I've always kind of looked at these like practices as kind of, it's not going to make or break anyone. If you excel learning this part of the offense, it's not going to be like, wow, like we're so excited. But it's like, if you struggle a lot with what you're being asked to learn, that is going to reflect very negatively on you, right? So like, it's kind of a not a free space, but like, if you don't pass go, you don't collect $100 situation. Like, you got to get back to go before we go to anything else. So that's kind of what you're figuring out. You also have numbers for a majority of the UDFA class. I don't need to go through all of them. Moochie Dixon's in number 84. I've always felt like 84 is like a good wide receiver number. I don't like the low numbers for wide receivers. I'm a traditionalist when it comes to jersey numbers. Don't give me, I don't like 1. I don't like 10. I want 80s. But, we got guys in 2022 and 22, and that's not going to change. I keep reading Marcus Yarns as Marcus Yams. I can't not do it. We need more distinguishable R's and N's. But Marcus Yarns is in number 34, which is that's what Kool-Aid McKinstry wore last year before changing his number, which again, like, that's what I mean when I say these are not really official. Like, a lot of times you get to roster cut downs and more jersey numbers become available and guys change their number because there was one they wanted all along but couldn't have. I don't think that's going to happen with Tyler, but it could definitely happen with some of these other guys.
Yeah, I just remember the last like real, I don't want to say jersey scandal, not scandal, but just Mark Ingram going through a bunch of numbers, and it was like he just couldn't find one that was doing him well after 22 wasn't available for him.
Yeah, he was just weird. He was in 5, and I think Kendre Miller is actually going to be wearing 5 now. Who is in number 5? Yeah, Kendre switched to number 5. Something we haven't mentioned. Yeah. Spencer Rattler is now going to be wearing number 2.
The deuce,
which is perfect because I think he's going to be QB2. It's like it's the correct backup quarterback number. Otherwise, I don't know if there are any major changes. Brandon Cooks is obviously going to be wearing 10. Velus Jones is going to be in 13. So if you were angry about Equanimous St. Brown wearing number 13 last year, you have to be mad at Velus Jones wearing number 13 this year. Justin Reed is listed as number 21. Charlie Smith still number 39. Colin Saunders still going to be wearing 50, which is the number that I just doesn't feel right for a big defensive tackle. But hey, I've said my piece on that. They still have Ryan Ramczyk listed in number 71.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, he hasn't officially retired yet. They have to wait until June 1st to officially file the paperwork so that they can get the benefit of splitting it over 2 years. And that's where we're at. And, we haven't really talked about it. It'll be something we talk about over the next few weeks. The Saints haven't designated anyone as their post-June 1 cuts. They don't have to do that with Ryan. They just have to wait because it's a retirement. But for guys like Derek Carr, Taysom Hill, there will be some benefit to doing that if they choose to do it. Now, Taysom Hill won't really save him a ton of money in the long term, but it will free up $10 million against the cap this year if they did that. So you would be talking about, well, if you want to go out there and sign a Keenan Allen or somebody like that, that would give you some flexibility, but next year you're going to be in a weird situation. So it's just something to keep in mind. Keep going down the line. I don't see any other jersey changes that are worth mentioning. Jack Stahl is going to be in 88, Devon Godshaw in number 92, and Chris Rumpf in the 98. So those are the jersey numbers to keep in mind. So if you were dying to go out and buy a Chris Rumpf jersey, that'll be number 98. You'll probably have to go on the NFL website and make your own. But you can.
Yeah, those. I mean, when you got to do the create your own too, that's going to cost some money too because they're not obviously just distributed a ton of.
Yeah, they're more expensive,
right?
But, if that's what you want, if you're an Ike Adams super fan, well, which did I mention Ike? He's got to be on here, huh?
He's still 0, right?
He's back in 27.
Oh, okay.
You're thinking Ugo's always been 0,
right?
Ike Adam was 27, so he even got his number back, which is good for him.
Okay.
And I always appreciate that as someone who has to deal with a lot of photos. Like I have to pull a lot of stock photos for players. It's always annoying when you have a player who, like when Marquez Callaway went from 1 to 12, or I'm sorry, from 12 to 1, it was like, I don't want to use a picture of him in 12 because then it's going to be like clearly old. So I appreciate it. Ike back, so I can still use all those number 27 photos, which I know he did that for me, and so I want to thank him for that.
The number time always fun to go through, and then it's like we got a lot of different guys. You're learning them throughout the season, and just trying to get that to stick in your head. So hopefully they don't flip flop too often.
Correct. Yeah, and this is always the time of year where I try to memorize the jerseys. We should have an episode where you quiz me on it. All right. One other thing to note, we don't have to talk about it a ton here because we're going to talk about it a ton next week. 2025 schedule announcement is a week from today. So it'll be Wednesday, May 14th. We'll find out the biggest things for me personally, and this is a little selfish, but okay, when is that game in Buffalo? When is that game in Chicago?
For sure.
Because there's a lot of things that, it's you're kind of guessing. Okay, when are you going to be the most healthy? When are you going to be the least healthy? When are you going to be dealing with a backup quarterback? Blah, 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 stuff like that. It's hard to predict what's going to happen. One thing you can predict is that Buffalo in September is a lot more manageable than Buffalo in December. And the same thing with Chicago. So, like, that's a big difference, getting Buffalo at the front end of your schedule versus Buffalo at the back end of your schedule. It's also true with games in Miami and Tampa. So if you get those games in September, the heat might be an issue versus games in December, where it's like you want to go to Tampa and Miami in December. It's ideal. I don't think it's as big of an issue for the Saints as it could be for some other teams, just because the Saints spend their whole training camp dealing with worse humidity than you're even going to deal with in Miami or Tampa. So, like, you're actually accustomed to it at that point of the season. Whereas, like, a team like Green Bay, like, I remember when the Saints had to pick a location for that game against Green Bay, they were like, yeah, let's go to freaking Jacksonville in September, because Green Bay is not going to have any frame of reference for what that's going to feel like, but we're going to be used to it at that point in the season. And I don't know how much that played into the 38-3 result, but there's a reason they forced the Packers to go to Green Bay and not, I don't know, Minnesota or somewhere that would have been more comfortable for them. So it's just something to mention.
Yeah, like you said, with the schedule coming out, those cold weather games, you always keep an eye on. For me too, what week is the home opener? Who's it against? And then also, how many of those primetime matchups do the Saints end up having?
Yeah, I don't think they're going to get a lot.
I feel like the under over maybe 3.
The other question is international games. I would be surprised if they get an international game, but we'll have to see. I mean, they're adding so many that we're getting to the point that it's like, I think the ideal scenario for the NFL over the long term, like as we kind of build this out, is that every team deals with at least one international game, the same way that every team has to deal with at least one Thursday game, right? Like, it's a punishment until it's a requirement. You know, and maybe not as big of a punishment in the sense of, like, yeah, a lot of teams want the experience of going to London and playing a game. They want the experience of doing that. But it, like, is a competitive balance issue at this point, because the Jaguars spend 2 weeks in London and have to come back and adjust. You're telling me that adjusting back to your normal NFL schedule after 2 weeks in London is not difficult and something that not every team has to do. So I do think, like, whether it's the case this year or 10 years down the road, as you build this out, we're going to eventually be in a scenario where every NFL reporter who travels is going to have a passport.
Yeah, and I feel like when you extend the schedule, add another game, maybe add another bye week in there, so then you have that more of a chance to have that quote-unquote recoup time after having to do a big overseas travel.
Yeah, and I think you're also going to see teams kind of have home travel situations. Like, I think the Saints are going to end up being the France team. Like, over time, you might see, like, okay, the Saints have one game a year in France, you know, and the same way that the Jaguars basically play in London every year. So we'll see how that goes. Like, I think, you know, in theory, it's a lot easier than in practice. So it's going to take some time, but I think that's what the NFL wants. And the NFL, when the NFL wants something, they tend to get it.
No, I'm going to have to try and convince WWL Radio that the entire sports talk show needs to go on the road if the Saints are playing in France. We'll definitely be envious of that trip you get to make. London was a ton of fun, but would love to see France as well, man.
I am looking forward this time around to you having to host the 4 a.m. pregame show as I just casually wake up in the morning and say, how you doing? Are you doing good? Yeah. How's the weather treating you? Oh, it's still dark. That's right.
That was the most epic pregame show ever. Come on.
I will never forget driving in to host the pregame show down Canal Street and watching all the people still out from the night before on a completely different day. I was starting Sunday. They were still on Saturday. But all right, let's wrap up this segment. We're going to come back and hear from Drew Brees, an interview you and Mike Detillier did on Sports Talk this week, you know, kind of breaking down what he's, you know, he's got a thing going on. You know, he's always got an iron in the fire, and this is no different. He's got an iron. So we're going to hear about it. We're also going to hear his thoughts on the QB situation, Tyler Shough, all that. Always good to hear from Drew Brees. So let's hit the break, come back with that. All right, and we're back on Inside Black and Gold. Jeff Nowak, Steve Geller. As promised, we're going to dive right into our interview, WWL Radio's interview with the great, the future Hall of Famer, the future Saints Ring of Honor, the Drew Brees. Here you go.
Drew, we haven't got to talk to you post-draft time, but it's kind of a two-part question for you. First of all, there's nothing like experience in the NFL, playing the most critical position at quarterback. And, with Tyler Shough, he's going to be a 26-year-old rookie. But he got to play for a guy that really well in Jeff Brom. And thing with Jeff is, man, I'm getting old. I remember when Jeff was the quarterback for Howard Schnellenberger at Louisville. And then he goes on to the NFL where he was a backup with a number of teams, becomes a very successful coach. And he coached a team a little bit about at Purdue. And looking at it, what could Jeff have really kind of worked with him in a year to get him ready for the NFL? Because, again, that experience part he's got to earn. And secondly would be about what you know about Tyler Shough and how well he can handle the NFL.
Yeah. Well, first off, I'd say, Jeff Brom has been pretty masterful at developing quarterbacks throughout his coaching career. Obviously, he played the position, so he comes at it from a unique perspective there. I really like his offense and his system and the way he develops guys. He coached Aiden O'Connell at Purdue. Aiden O'Connell spent 6 years at Purdue. He was a walk-on. Constantly was kind of winning the quarterback job and then unfortunately would get hurt, so he kind of battled injuries. But his last 2 years at Purdue, he put up some pretty incredible numbers and obviously started a bunch of games for the Raiders the last 2 years. Tyler Shough, I almost see a little bit similar from the perspective that here's a guy who spent, 7 years or 6 years in college, 7 years in college, was it 3 years at Oregon, 3 years at Tech, and then one at Louisville. Obviously battled some pretty devastating injuries at times, which ended his seasons prematurely. But to me, here's a guy who comes in with a ton of maturity. He's had to battle through a lot of adversity. He's been exposed to a lot of college football. He's gotten a ton of experience. And I think spending that last year in Louisville with Jeff Brom, I think was probably like that, tipping point for him that where he was able to kind of combine his experience and kind of all that he had to, battle through, all of a sudden now being with a coach who's a great developer of quarterbacks and a great system. And, man, I just see some of the throws that he made last year and, he's a big, strong guy who's tough, who will stand in the pocket, who will take hits. Obviously a great athlete, for his size as well. But man, you just see him making some throws that are pretty rare, pretty unique. Great anticipation, good arm strength. I think more so than anything, I just think there's a level of maturity. He comes in and he's probably not going to act like a rookie or sound like a rookie, just given the amount of experience that he has. What is he, 24, 25 years old? So, I think he comes in really well equipped.
Hey, Drew, it's WWL Sports Director Steve Geller. Hope you're doing all right. Know you were going around here during Super Bowl time, and the big buzz at that time, besides the game going on, was the fact that Kellen Moore might become the next head coach of the Saints. He ends up winning the Super Bowl here with the Eagles, and shortly after gets named the new boss of the black and gold here. So what's your take on the Saints' new head coach? And I know he's a young guy, but definitely has that NFL and QB pedigree that you want to see.
Yeah, look, I've been really impressed with Kellen, and everyone in the building seems to be really impressed with him as well. Kellen Moore was a great quarterback in his own right. I mean, you talk about a guy who came out of college football with like a 52-3 record, playing for Boise State. I remember watching him play back in college, and it was one of those things where Boise State was always punching well above their their weight. Playing against some teams that you thought they had no business being on the field with, and they would find ways to win games every year that you just you had to admire. And Kellen Moore was the quarterback and at the helm in a lot of those big games. So here's a guy who's kind of used to being a little bit of the underdog, maybe used to being kind of sold a little bit short, and yet he came into the NFL. I think it was obvious that he had a bright future as a coach. Has kind of worked his way up from being a quarterback coach to a play caller. And I think he's been in some really unique situations with some other great coaches and great offensive minds. So I can see how he's developed kind of his philosophy. And I think just the things that he's implemented just within the building, as I talk to scouts and I talk to players and I talk to other coaches, I think he's really, kind of instantly made a big impact, and guys have a ton of respect for him and I think are really excited to play for him.
True. One of the things, you never know when you enter the league and how things are and kind of the swirl of the tornado that happens in the NFL. And I remember when you first came in with the Chargers, okay, you had a veteran in Doug Flutie, and then they draft Phillip Rivers, and it was with another general manager. The injury occurs, and you end up in New Orleans. You see the situation here in the offseason with the Saints with Derek Carr, and kind of how all this has been handled or maybe not handled really, really well. And I think when you have that sort of turbulence at the quarterback position, that's not good for anybody at this point in time. But you went through a situation, I don't want to say similar, but there was always that, we want Rivers instead of Drew. Or let's go with the old Pops. Let's go with Flutie instead. And there were people that wanted you at the quarterback position. The steadiness at the quarterback spot and understanding that position, and then we don't know about the injury situation with Derek Carr at all, kind of puts this team in a real box right now.
Yeah, I mean, look, it seems like everything's been pretty hush-hush. I mean, hopefully there's been very clear communication between Derek and the organization. I really hope there has been. I've reached out to Derek just to check on him, genuinely as a friend, hoping that everything's okay and hoping that, he's able to get healthy and be able to play. But, look, you're always preparing for the future, so whether the drafting of Tyler Shough was because, hey, we really think we need a guy who, can come in and start for us this year, or push Derek Carr, or, hey, it's we're just thinking about the future. Regardless, a lot of times, hey, you see a player that you really like and you see that he's in a great value position in the draft, you're going to take him anyway. So bottom line is I think they got the guy that they wanted. The Saints got the guy that they wanted. They got the guy that they had their eye on and that they thought really, really highly of and feel like he can be a solution for him, into the future. So, we'll see how it plays out. I hope Derek's healthy. At the end of the day, I hope it's an unbelievable quarterback competition where they bring out the best in each other, because I think that goes for every position. Every position, especially with a new head coach coming in, needs to be, hey, each and every one of you guys has to prove it to me. You have to, even the veteran guys, you have to prove why you still deserve to be in the position you are as a starter, as a leader on this team. You got to prove it to me. And then young guys, we're going to develop you. You find a way to contribute and a way to bring value to this team, because this division's wide open and we need to go win this thing.
Drew, what's your thoughts on the rest of the Saints coaching staff for these QBs? You've got a quarterback we talked about in Kellen Moore, offensive coordinator, you got Doug Nussmeier, and then the quarterback's coach, Scott Tolzien. So there's tons of QB experience that's got to be great for these young guys to develop here.
Look, absolutely. You've got guys that have tons of either NFL coaching experience or college and NFL playing experience. So that always is huge when it comes to just having support and great coaching. So yeah, look, I think especially with what you see Kellen Moore does in every place that he's been with the quarterback and building an offense around him that puts him in the best position to succeed. And you look at some of the playmakers that we have at the wide receiver position, running back position, tight end position. I mean, look, we got weapons and arguably one of the best offensive lines in football. I mean, in my opinion, obviously I played with some of these guys, but we continue to draft guys in the first round, at the tackle position. There's 2 out of 3 years now. So I think that says a lot about, kind of the type of team that we're trying to build, how we want to hang our hat, and obviously developing the quarterback because it's a QB-driven league.
Drew, man, I think about you when, within a span of 2 weeks, we all sort of knew Ryan Ramczyk was going to hang it up, with the health issue. And then Teron Armstead announces his retirement, and that wasn't a real surprise either. But, man, to have those two guys for bookends, and it seemed like forever. You didn't have to worry about the right tackle and the left tackle. And, man, Teron was so good. And the only time, he did spend some time down with injuries, and so I think that's sort of kind of how he was built. That, man, if you're that good of an athlete, that big man, sometimes there's going to be a breakdown there. But you didn't have to worry about your blind side with Teron Armstead, and he was a great teammate, and so many of them that played on that team with you would talk about him as a team leader. And they were like, with Ramczyk, Ryan didn't say much, but he got everything done right. And so your thoughts on kind of in a 1 month span to see your kind of final tackles, they retired also.
Yeah. I mean, you said it. Probably, both of them had such a unique story. Teron Armstead, Arkansas Pine Bluff, 3rd round pick, was really kind of this track guy who just kind of ended up playing football. Came in. I'll never forget his first start. It was 2013 against the Carolina Panthers. And I think it was Charlie Brown was our left tackle, ended up going down. And then so here comes Teron Armstead, and he's having to start against Greg Hardy, who was one of the premier pass rushers in the league that year. And there was just something about, like, the way that Teron Armstead flipped the switch. Like, you could just see the look in his eye, like, okay, I'm taking on the best in the league this week, and, I'm going to get the job done. And he had it was one of those moments where you're just like, okay, we got one here, And then Ryan Ramczyk, here's a guy who ended up going to trade school to be a welder, right? And then ends up at Wisconsin. I think walked back on to Wisconsin to play football. And then next thing you know, we trade up into the first round to draft him in 2017. And, he takes Streif's place when Streif retires, and obviously becomes a phenomenal player, a Pro Bowl player. So both those guys, unbelievable stories. I credit, obviously, our scouting department and the guys that do so much work and research to find these diamonds in the rough, and then develop them into great players. And, so much of that is just their own personal kind of attitude and, self-starting nature that, and they want to be great players and they want to be valuable members of the team. And, different personalities, Ramczyk, quiet, just lunch pail guy, go to work. Maybe that was the welder in him. And then Teron Armstead, a little bit more outspoken and, kind of the life of the party. But, those are some of my best memories, being in the huddle with those guys, looking them in the eye in critical situations, knowing that they had my back. The moments in the locker room, moments on the practice field where you just have a chance to, connect as teammates and build the camaraderie and build the relationship. And, always love those guys.
Drew, one of the big changes coming this season, too, for this Saints squad lies in the defensive coordinator, something I know you studied, obviously, your entire career opposing defenses. What do you think of Brandon Staley and what he's going to be bringing to this black and gold Florida League D, and also the impact it has on the personnel here?
Yeah, look, I have always had a ton of respect for Staley, and I'm sure you guys know his story. Staley spent most of the 2009 training camp with us, with the Saints, in the quarterback room. Do you guys know this story?
I was not aware of it. No, I just was like, wow.
Oh yeah. So Staley was a college coach at like Mercyhurst or something like that. He was tight with Joe Lombardi, and so he had gotten the ability to come and basically spend training camp with us in 2009. So, and I think Staley played quarterback in college, if I'm not mistaken. So he came in and was just sitting in our QB room. He knew he was going to move to the defensive side of the ball and be a defensive coach in college, but he wanted to really kind of study the offensive side because he felt like it would help him on the defensive side. So he spent most of that training camp with us, and he was hyper intelligent, like to the point where he absorbed so much of our offense that like he knew our offense as well as we did by the time he left. And then through the years, he would watch our tape every week. He would send thoughts to Joe Lombardi about, our opponents or, what he was seeing with our offense, if he started seeing tendencies that he wanted us to be aware of. And, he was like, this was all just kind of behind the scenes, just kind of being a friend, Hey, thanks for the opportunity to come watch you guys. I love watching you. Here's some thoughts. And then, you watch him work his way up through the coaching ranks. Outside linebacker coach for the Bears, I think, with Vic Fangio, and then obviously defensive coordinator, and then becoming the head coach, with the Chargers. And so I kept up with him along the way too. And man, I've always really liked Brandon, really appreciated his work ethic, his attention to detail, the way he came from the offensive side to now be coaching defense. I love his scheme. I think he has the ability to take some players on defense and really kind of make them the focal points, from a coverage perspective or from a blitz perspective. And so, yeah, I really like Brandon and his scheme.
True. We saw this past year Tom Brady get involved with the Las Vegas Raiders, and part owner, and I'm sure consultant. Where now he said, I don't have anything to do with the draft. Now I don't believe any of that, but that's all up for debate with that. Would that be something somewhere down the line? Because I know you've always talked about you want to see your kids through high school and that sort of thing. And, hey, listen, Nussmeier only got this year left. So, your boy that wants to come to LSU, that's going to be a spot open somewhere down the line here. But your thoughts on the future for you, would that be something you would consider similar to what Tom Brady's involved with the Raiders?
Yeah, I see myself being involved with the NFL for the rest of my life. It's in my blood. It's in my heart. I know there's a ton of value I can bring. So it's just a matter of when and where.
All right. Thanks again to Drew Brees for coming on this week. Always great to hear from my GOAT. I don't know if he's your GOAT. He's my GOAT. He's Cam Jordan's GOAT. Top 2, but not 2. Whole situation. Another event. If you want to go check it out, that grand opening is next week. So we heard from Drew. Now let's turn back around, talk about Saints rookie minicamp to close out the show. Again, I'm Jeff Nowak. He is Steve Geller. This is Inside Black and Gold. Who dat? Stick around. We'll be right back. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. Jeff Nowak, Steve Geller, getting you ready for Saints rookie minicamp. Coming up this weekend, the Saints players, all 9 draft picks, all 11 UDFAs, and a bunch of tryout players. We do not have an official roster yet, which is annoying. It's going to come out probably an hour from now, and we'll have the full list of tryout players. But as of recording, we do not have it. We do know a few tryout players. Hunter Decker's the quarterback who, I think it was Iowa State, and he ended up getting kicked out of the NCAA for gambling. He's an intriguing guy, but tryout players almost like I had someone ask, like, why aren't you talking about Hunter Deckers? He's going to be at Saints rookie camp. I'm like, until a tryout player actually makes it to OTAs, I'm not talking about tryout players because it's not worth my time. If he makes it to the full roster and ends up at training camp or at least at OTAs, then we'll have a full episode talking about Hunter Deckers and the weird scenario that he is in. Until then, we're going to focus on the players that we expect to make the roster, and those are the ones that are already under contract, right? So let's dive in. First things first. We already mentioned in the first segment the jersey numbers, but let's just run through the names of everyone we know will be there. It's going to be 20 because it's 9 draft picks, 11 UDFAs. So we'll just go from top to bottom, and then we'll kind of talk about some of them individually. For right now, let's start with Kelvin Banks, going to be in number 71, offensive tackle out of Texas. Vernon Broughton will be wearing 91, defensive tackle out of Texas. Fadil Diggs, going to be in number 40, edge rusher out of Syracuse. Maliki Matavao, tight end out of UCLA. He'll be wearing number 80. Devin Neal, running back out of Kansas. He'll be in number 30. Quincy Riley, number 29, cornerback out of Louisville. Jonas Sanker, 33, safety out of Virginia. Tyler Shough, obviously, number 6, quarterback out of Louisville. Linebacker Danny Stutzman, going to be wearing number 47, linebacker at Oklahoma. Those are the draft picks. Then the UDFAs. Dallas Beenum, number 37. He's a cornerback out of South Dakota State. James Burnip, punter out of Alabama, does not have a jersey number as of now. Jasheen Davis, edge rusher out of Wake Forest, number 59. Elliot Davison, safety out of UTSA, number 35. Moochie Dixon, wide receiver out of SMU. He'll be wearing number 84. Offensive tackle Easton Kilty out of Kansas State. He'll be in number 73. Linebacker Tyreem Powell out of Rutgers. He'll be wearing number 57. Torricelli Simpkins III, which is quite a name. I'm fascinated on the background of Torricelli. Not a name you hear all the time, but there's 3 of them. The 3rd generation Torricelli. Guard out of South Carolina wearing number 68. Omari Thomas, defensive end out of Tennessee, number 74. Chris Tyree, not related to David Tyree. I checked. Wide receiver out of Virginia, number 89. And then Marcus Yarns, who I will do my best to not refer to as Marcus Yams, although I still enjoy it, so I may continue to call him Marcus Yams. Running back out of Delaware, 5'11", wearing number 34. He's the only one I mentioned his height. I don't know why, but that's the list. And then there will be another dozen or so tryout players. There'll be at least, we mentioned Hunter Decker, so you have that quarterback arm. You always want to have 2 or 3 throwers of the football. So it's not just your rookie quarterback throwing 1 billion passes. You're typically going to have a kicker or two just so you can do some special team stuff. The Saints do have a punter in Burnip that they'll have to kind of be the camp leg. But he's a UDFA, but I imagine they will have an actual kicker to do kickoff stuff, but we'll have to see. Either way, that's the list. Anyone there stand out to you?
We talked about, I don't want to say a dark horse already, but someone that has a good shot to stick around for the roster out of some of the UDFAs. South Dakota State corner, Dallas Beanham stands out to me. You got to look at those numbers that he put up, finishing his career 12 interceptions. That's third all-time in school history there. Just a guy that's been disruptive around the ball, causing, fumbles, breaking up passes, and think that could be a possible slot corner guy for this team, whether he makes the roster or, the practice squad. I just think Beanham is a guy that has a good chance to stick around in black and gold right now.
Yeah, and 6'1", 200 pounds. Like you want a guy with the size. Like when you're talking about a UDFA and like, okay, what is their ability to make the rosters? Two things I look at. One, do they have the traits you want at that position, which is very helpful because you can develop guys, but it's a lot easier to develop guys with the measurables you want. And especially a guy at South Dakota State who, is probably going to have a little technique learning curve to get over. I look at a guy, Rico Payton, last year out of Division II Pittsburgh State, and you're like, okay, I can work with the ability. I can't teach a guy to be the size and the athleticism I want. I can teach him how to play the position. And so that's, when you're looking at a guy like that, so it's like, okay, does he have measurables? Two, is he a guy that will be able to contribute on special teams right away?
Right.
And that's why a lot of times, like you look at the wide receivers, and wide receivers are exciting. They're the flashy, they can make flashy plays. They draw your eyes because everyone, whether they want to admit it or not, you watch the offense play the defense, and you're always going to lean toward the offense. Like it's hard at times. Like it takes me a few days typically to stop watching practice as if I am watching an offense face a defense and I'm like rooting for the offense to succeed. Because it's like you got to watch both sides. And so a lot of times people pay more attention to the wide receivers when in reality, guys on the other side of the ball have a much better chance to make the roster, because if you're a UDFA making the roster, it's probably on the basis of you have a chance to be a core special teamer as a younger player, whereas a wide receiver, especially a wide receiver making it to the NFL, who is probably a star player in college, there's a chance they haven't played special teams once. I don't know if Moochie Dixon can get on the field and make a tackle. I do know that Dallas Beanham can go on the field and make a tackle. So he has a better chance. So it's just something to keep in mind. All that said, so my pick for who do I think has the best chance to make the roster out of the UDFA class? It's got to be the punter. It's got to be James Burnip, who, it's funny because it's like, okay, why didn't he get drafted? A lot of teams just don't draft punters. Like it's rare to even see a punter drafted. So that doesn't mean there's no ability there. He was a 4-year starter at Alabama. He has the second highest average career punting average to only J.K. Scott, who was a very, very good punter, is punting in the NFL right now. He's punted the ball 67 yards at Alabama, which is a pretty stiff number. I think I was reading on Alabama's website, he's got I want to say 14 punts of 50 plus yards. His average this past season was 45.4 yards per punt. His career high average was 47.5 in 2023. Sometimes we talked about this in the past, like gross punting average can be skewed a little bit by, okay, where were you asked to punt from? If you're punting from the 50 constantly, your gross punting average is not going to be as high. So, it's tough to just look at that number and be like, well, why did it go down from year over year? I look at, okay, how the 47.3 is a pretty elite average in general. He also only averaged 1 yard per return this past season, so that's solid. His net punting average is harder to find in college than it is in the NFL, per the Alabama website, which it wasn't a stat I was able to pull up in any official capacity. They had it listed as a 44.7 net punt average, which is pretty elite. Again, I'm not basing that stat as fact, but if you believe that stat from Alabama's website, that number, if you pushed it to the NFL, would have ranked number 3 among all NFL punters last year. So, I mean, if he's able to go out and put a stat like that on the table and numbers like that on the table, I have a hard time seeing Matt Hayball beating him out, right? Because I don't think Matt Hayball did anything last year that was particularly exciting from a punting perspective. Punting is not particularly exciting from a football perspective. So, maybe I'm overreacting, but I didn't see anything from him that was all. I thought Lou Hedley had a better rookie season overall than Matt Hayball had last year, because I saw Lou Hedley pin a lot of punts inside the 10. Matt Hayball pinned the most punts in the NFL inside the 20, but there's a big difference between a punt down at the 8 and a punt down at the 18. And
you only have one guy ahead of you here with Hayball, so it's definitely an interesting battle to see what happens with the punter position. Like you said, maybe the directional kicking is something Hayball would probably excel in, but the leg is definitely not as impressive.
Yeah, and so just for perspective, Hayball's average last year was 44 yards, 40.4 net. Hedley's the year before that was a 39.7 average. So it's a significant difference in leg. But yeah, like you mentioned, I mean, there is the NFL. I mean, the returners are better. Yeah, the return teams are better. The return coverage is better, but the return blocking is also better. So like it's tough to look at it. It's really also going to be a question of, what does Phil Galliano want? Darren Rizzi's not around anymore. Maybe he wants to approach the punting game a little differently than Rizzi did. Rizzi was all about eliminating returns entirely, which is why he moved on from Blake Gillikin to Lou Hedley in the first place. It's, why you want Matt Hayball over maybe a bigger leg punter. So it's a lot of it's going to depend on that. But yeah, like you mentioned, a Dallas Beanham, for example, there's a dozen players who are vying for a roster spot in that situation. Some of them are for sure roster guys. Quincy Riley, for example, he's making this roster one way or the other. And then a guy like Rico Payton from last year. Some of these other guys that he's got a much stiffer task ahead to make this roster than, okay, I'm James Burnap. All I got to do is beat that one guy. So, yeah.
And a guy that's from Australia, but that he doesn't kick Australian style.
Yeah, which is strange. There's a lot of background there to dive into, and I'm sure we'll be talking about him more and more because there will be a legitimate punter competition. But yeah, he's got that Aussie football background, but is more of a traditional punter. And Hayball, he doesn't have quite as Hedley was legit weird kicks, constantly rolling out and doing the rugby style punts. Hayball he had that in his game, but didn't use it as much, just because like they're kind of dialing it back year over year. So,
right.
Any other UDFAs you want to talk about? Otherwise, I want to hear from Scott Shanley and go into a couple of these players.
Let's hit into what Scott's got to say.
All right. So a couple guys that I think are interesting. Vernon Broughton is going to be an interesting guy to watch in terms of, is he a day one starter? Is he a developmental guy? You drafted him at number 71 overall. So that would indicate to me that you plan to play him a significant number of reps as a rookie. So it'll be interesting to see just how quickly his game translates to the NFL. He's a big guy. Bo Davis, the new Saints defensive line coach, knows him well, coached him for 3 years at Texas. This is what Scott Shanley had to say on Vernon, a guy he also knows very well.
I think I'm obligated for Vernon to be my favorite player because he's a Cy Ridge Ram in Houston, and my brother coached him in high school. So I know a lot about Vernon. Vernon came out as a defensive end, went to Texas, and the first thing I did, my brother texted me right away and said, we got a Cy Ridge Ram that's a New Orleans Saint. And I said, is he tough? And he goes, oh, he's tough. You're going to love him. So I'm putting a lot of stock into my brother's high school evaluation of Vernon since he coached him. But yes, when you talk about going from a 4-3 to a 3-4, you need those body types. You need those big bodies up front. Those guys are going to get double teamed. They're going to have to two gap. They're going to have to keep the linebackers clean. So I definitely like what they did. And you talk about gotcha. You need those big body types because the run defense just was not good enough. Hasn't been good enough the last couple of years. And really, they lost a handful of games just based on how bad their run defense was. So I love the big bodies they're getting on the defensive line.
So if you didn't hear that, Cy Ridge, it took me a while to figure out what he was saying, which is short for Cypress Ridge High School, which is where Andrew Shanley, Scott's brother, is the head coach, was the head coach when Vernon was there several years back, is still the head coach. So yeah, some good intel there from Scott. And yeah, I mean, being able to be better against the run is going to be huge for this team. I don't think they're going to be a team that wins a lot of shootouts, right? They're going to have to make games ugly. And how you do that is forcing a lot of punts, keeping teams in second and third and long, and, sending some pressure when you get the opportunity. And you can't send pressure unless you get teams in a throwing situation. So, I think he's going to be one of the more interesting guys to watch.
Yeah, that run defense Shanley brought up was definitely been a huge issue with this team, not just last season, you mentioned for a couple years now. It's just sad because along with that, great offense, you think about with Drew Brees, for me, the Saints defense at stopping the run was just so solid for so long and just seemed to fall off a cliff dramatically.
Yeah, no, and you had kind of stalwart players there for a long time that you kind of took for granted, right? Like David Onyemata was just a guy that's like, okay, he's there. How important is he? Well, you saw pretty quickly how important he was when he was no longer there. A couple other things we can mention. Kelvin Banks is going to be interesting to watch in terms of where do the Saints line him up at rookie minicamp? Because I remember last year, the conversation afterward was like, yeah, they threw Taliesin Fuaga at left tackle, but that's just because it's rookie camp and Trevor Penning's not here, and they certainly wouldn't just throw him at left tackle to see what happens. Well, wouldn't you know it? If you get to training camp and guess who's at left tackle and never changed positions ever is Taliesin Fuaga, and he became your day one left tackle. So I don't know, maybe if they do that again, we might end up with the same takeaway of like, well, let's wait and see. We don't want to overreact if Kelvin Banks, for example, gets a bunch of reps at left guard. But it's also not nothing. So just something to keep in mind, because I think in those situations, a lot of time it's like, okay, if he looks good there, then maybe we'll continue. If he looks bad there, then it's probably not worth it. So we'll have to see.
Do you think the Saints use that 9-pick though to put him at guard? I don't feel like that. It doesn't feel in my bones to be right.
No, but at the same time, you want to get your best 5 players on the field immediately. So if the way to do that is by starting him at guard, full well intending to give him opportunities at tackle when those arise, which could be as soon as year 2 if you move on from Trevor Penning, then I could see that happening. I could also see them trying out Trevor Penning at guard in OTAs, and then in training camp, you make the real decision of like, okay, what's their primary position going to be this year? I do think there's a benefit to getting Kelvin Banks reps at guard so that if you need him at guard, he can play there, right? So like this would be the time of year where you can do that without a ton of pressure. I would expect to see him at tackle because I think the philosophy should be you let a guy fail at tackle before you decide, oh, he's a guard. And right now, you don't have anyone to say like, are you kind of pressured to move him because there's that guy and you don't want to move him, right? Now we're going to get to OTAs, and I think that's probably a more likely scenario where you see Kelvin at guard and you kind of see how Trevor's picking up right tackle, how Fuaga looks at in the new offense at left tackle.
Yeah, obviously we'll have to wait and see with it, but yeah, to me it just feels like with Fuaga and Banks, you got your left, your bookend tackles, however you want to slice it, and I just roll with that from day one.
Yeah, it feels like you should, and you see if Penning can hack it at guard. If he can't, then you cut bait and move on.
Right.
Because you invested a lot in Kelvin Banks. I don't think you invest in number 9 overall pick if he's not a guy you intend to at least give a shot to be your day one starting left tackle or right tackle. But I don't like the idea of getting a guy to the NFL and changing his position on day one. I really don't.
Okay. The flip side can go for Fuaga too, because you just flipped him last year, and do you really want to flip him back?
Yeah, but you're flipping him back to his natural position.
Right, I know.
It would be the same case if you have Kelvin Banks and you throw him at guard this year and see how he does, and then year 2 you flip him back. It was like, but he's played tackle his whole life. So I don't have an issue with that. It's he's going back to a position he's more comfortable at. But again, if I want to do that, if I'm going to do that, I want to do it now. I don't want to do it next year, right? So if I'm moving, if I am, and I know you probably don't want this many moving parts, but if I'm moving Trevor to guard, I'm probably also moving Fuaga to right tackle, because I don't want to do that. Like if I'm playing both of them at tackle, I don't want to get to the end of this year and be like, actually, let's flip.
See, and then, you start overthinking things, or this is probably what the team might, come across as well. Do you really want to put a rookie at left tackle and then a guy that's never played guard at left guard?
No, probably not.
Right.
The cart is completely out of view of the horse right now. So we'll see how that goes. This is what Scott Shanley had to say about Calvin.
I think I'm obligated for Vernon to be my favorite player because he's
on the clip.
Yeah, I think Sark's done a really good job at Texas. They not only recruit great players, but they have toughness. I think he's brought toughness to the program. It's no longer the soft Texas guys that you used to think of. And thinking back to last year, I remember watching a lot of Texas football, and Kevin Banks stood out. And a lot of times, offensive linemen don't stand out. But I remember seeing him thinking, "Wow, this guy is going to be a stud in the NFL." And I'm like a lot of fans. I was kind of torn at number 9, like. No, quit picking offensive line. You get sick of picking defensive lineman, offensive lineman every year. But when you look at it, tell me a better player at that spot who you feel like now you have two concrete guys at left tackle and right tackle. It's a hard thing to pass up on a guy like Kevin Banks when he's sitting there at 9. Even if you trade back a couple spots, which I kind of wanted to do to grab more picks, there's no certainty he's going to be there anymore, because I think a lot of people had him really high on the boards. And, you solidify your left tackle and right tackle, that's more than probably 75% of the league can say. So you get those two positions taken care of, and now you can worry about the rest.
Yes, Scott is like one of us.
You're right there. Exactly. You want that sexy positional player instead of just beefing up the line.
Yeah, and his initial reaction was like the 2009 offensive line didn't have a single first round pick on it, and and everyone was kind of like hinging on that, and then. You get like 24, 48 hours removed, and I think most people are like, okay, fine, you're right. Like, you need the offensive line. And the thing is, like, yeah, I get it. It's annoying to see them continue to pick offensive line every year, but until you get those picks right, you have to, right? It's like people are like, well, we picked Trevor Penning and that didn't work out, but then like you're missing the point of the reason you need a guy is because the Trevor Penning pick didn't work out. And so you got to keep taking swings. You do. And, you could have said, hey, let's go a different direction here and go with the offensive lineman at 40. And I get that. But at the end of the day, until you have your tackles figured out, it's going to be a need, right? People are like, is this really a need? Yes. Until you feel like you have 2 starting caliber, Pro Bowl caliber offensive tackles, then yeah, it's going to be a need, because every team needs that until they have that. And then those are the teams you look at and like, wow, they're so successful. I can't put my finger on why. All right. One more, and we'll talk about Jonas Sanker, because we brought this up. 8-man football, not exactly something you see every day, but Scott Shanley, a guy who came up playing, you guessed it, 8-man football. So this is him talking about Jonas Sanker and also, what 8-man football is.
Well, I'll tell you what, that's incredible. It's basically arena football without the arena, and it's fun, and it's a lot of people. You don't even need bleachers because everybody just stands around the rope and watches the game. Field's 80 yards long, a little bit narrower, probably 40 yards wide, but it's a fun game to play. And when you go to those small towns and grow up the way some of us guys do, it's what you do, and you don't know any different. But yeah, I think with Jonas, you watch his tape of Virginia, and I thought he closed fast, he tackled, he was physical, and when you look at obviously where Tyrann is, just like Alvin in his where he is in his career, you got to start building depth behind these guys. I like the Reed signing in the offseason. I think he's really going to help at the safety position. So, yeah, you got to start getting some of these young guys and start getting them to learn under these veterans while the veterans are there, and that's how you kind of pass the torch. So hopefully Jonas turns out to be a great safety, and he's definitely going to be a great special teams player his first year.
Yeah, and I think if I had to pick, okay, what is the most under-the-radar player from this draft class that is going to have the biggest impact, I would pick Jonas, because I think one thing this team needs is a safety who can come up and lay the wood on people, who can go and make tackles, right? And that's why people love Marcus May last year. I'm not Marcus May. That's why people loved Will Harris last year, because that's what he did. He didn't cover particularly well, but he got upfield and he put his nose in and he stonewalled some running backs. And, you just don't have that in Tyrann Mathieu. Justin Reed, I think, is a hitter, but he's not what I would consider to be a strong safety guy. He's more of a free safety that can tackle. So I don't know. Like I feel like Jonas is going to be a guy who in 3-4 years is going to be a core part of this defense.
I like it too. Just I want to see someone push a guy like Jordan Howden, who has been a little bit of a disappointment so far, but it's still a little early to completely write Howden off, I feel like.
Yeah, my issue with Howden is he doesn't tackle well. He's out of position. He's not taking good angles, right? And that's what I need him to do. Like, I don't need him to be my free safety. I need him to get up there and make tackles, and he just has not done that. Maybe he's going into year 3. Year 3 is a big year for any draft pick.
Yeah.
But I also wouldn't be surprised if he misses the roster, because this is going to be a competitive roster to make down the line, right? Like, you can argue that they don't have the top end talent that other teams might have, but you do have a lot of guys who are vying for bigger roles, and his is a roster spot that, if you don't feel like he's getting it done, it's a new defense. Like, they're not going to be beholden to, well, you've been here the last 2 years, so we're definitely keep you around. 5th round pick from 2023. No, if you're not getting it done, you're not going to be here. Especially in that, like Tyrann Mathieu's not going anywhere, Cam Jordan's not going anywhere. Like there's a lot of guys who do have a kind of a cemented roster spot. He's not one of them. So if Jonas comes out and does his job better than him, probably not making it.
No, it was year 2 was disappointing because it didn't feel like he took that Howden talking about it, that he took that step forward at all.
Yeah, he didn't. And he had opportunities, right? You had injuries. Will Harris missed multiple weeks. Tyrann Mathieu was dealing with injuries throughout the course of the season. And these are chances for a young player to say, like, wow, maybe we move on. Maybe, like, that's the thing. Like, last year, you had all these young players playing. No one won a job. Like, no one did anything. Maybe Anthony Orji when he got opportunities to play, but like, no one did anything where you're like, oh wow, like we should play him more. Like, think about a Caden Ellis, right? Like, when you had to play him because guys were hurt, you came out of it thinking like, wow, we should play him more, right? And the Falcons came out of it saying, hey, we're going to sign you to a big time contract. Like, when your young players aren't doing that, it means that you don't have good young players, or at least not players that you're developing well.
Like I said, the book hasn't been completely written on Howden, but with year 3, like you said, coming up here, got to show me something. No question. And again, special teams is a big part of that. Right. So I expect Jonas to come in and be a core special teamer. Same thing with Danny Stutzman. Scott had a good answer on Danny Stutzman too. He's watched him a lot. His son is a student at Oklahoma, so he's watched a lot of Oklahoma football, Boomer Sooner all the way, right? And you're talking about a volume tackler who should come in and compete. He's got a bit of a chip on his shoulder because no one worked him out. I'm still fascinated to hear why no other team worked him out. Because it's like, this is a guy, like, I can understand if he was a 7th round fringe draft pick. Like, this is a pretty well-known commodity in the SEC this past season, over 100 tackles. So, no, I mean, Stutzman's another guy that should be fun. Quincy Riley. Like, the reason I'm higher on this draft class than the draft grades, as we talked about, like, so many of these names down the line, I think are impact players, right? Like Devin Neal, a 6th rounder, Quincy Riley, a 4th rounder, right? Danny Stutzman. Like, I think these are going to be guys that 4 or 5 years down the line, we're talking about like top of the depth chart guys. No, for all the complaints about, this Saints draft, I'm kind of surprised too. I felt like they got pretty damn good value, especially later on in the draft.
And that's why you say, like, hey, make 9 picks, right?
Yeah.
Because it's easy, and like, yeah, maybe half these guys don't end up doing anything, but right now we can be optimistic about it. And here's the thing, like, if they weren't here, you would have no one to be optimistic about. We would be sitting here trying to talk ourselves into more of these UDFAs. And I'd much rather talk myself into a Quincy Riley than, no offense to, I'm not even going to name them, but these guys on the UDFA list that are almost certainly, making the practice squad would be a win.
Right. Absolutely.
But all right, let's wrap this up. Again, Cam Jordan Day tomorrow. Don't miss it. Also, Saints rookie minicamp players are reporting on Thursday. Practices Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We'll be out there on Saturday. So we'll have our next podcast will be kind of a recap of what we saw, what was said, who we talked to, and and we'll go from there. Then it'll be OTAs, then minicamp, and then a break, and then training camp, and we'll be right back into it. It'll be a season before we know it. But all right, Steve, any parting thoughts before we move on here?
just anxious to get like that up close personal view of Tyler Shough, just shucking it around, baby.
Shuck it. Shuck it, baby. No, got to do better than that. That was disappointing on my part. We're going to have to workshop these puns and come back to you with something a little more official, but we got time.
Get the Shough out of here.
Who dat? Go Saints. Thanks everyone for listening. Peace.